profile. There we go. All right. Is it? Okay. Okay. So thank you so much for joining us again for our fifth series of 6. And today we're going to talk about yet a very important topic that is, I think, is so relevant right now as we're going through still this, new normal. I don't know if we've kind of gotten to the new normal yet, but we're certainly still at that point trying to figure out what the new normal is going to look like. And today's topic will be presented by Maxine Somerville. And the topic is called Positioning Your Organization as a Magnet for Top Talent. So I met Maxine, I guess about 3 years ago. Is that right, Maxine?
That's about right.
I was actually referred to them. They had a couple positions open. And so Maxine and I worked very closely along with Tracy Baird, who's the CEO, and I believe Tracy's on today. And we, Chisholm Consulting, helped them find several candidates, and they hired several candidates of those people, a CFO position, a director of philanthropy. So I had a great time working with them. They're really smart and proactive and all the things that you see in a successful nonprofit. But anyway, but Maxine is the Vice President of Human Resources at Engender Health. She is responsible for the management, administration, and coordination of the human resources function and is responsible for the development of the global HR vision, mission, and strategy for Engender Health. She also guides and manages the overall provisions of HR services, policies, and programs for all offices and employees in the US. Maxine has over 20 years of multifaceted human resources, including compensation, training and development, and benefits, in addition to her practical human resources experiences. Maxine earned a Master of Public Administration with a focus on human resources from George Washington University. Please join me in welcoming Maxine Somerville.
Thank you, Mia. I'm delighted to be here today. Let me share my screen so you'll be able to see my presentation. Technology is a challenge today. Let's see. All right. Let me, oops. Minimize this. Sorry, me, I'm just have a little difficulty sharing my screen, but I'll get there. All right, can you see my screen? Are you able to see my screen? Okay, great. Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I understand I have some tough acts to follow, but I'm certainly up to the challenge. It's been a great series thus far, and I want to thank Mia and her team for hosting such important topics, and also hosting some very dynamic speakers that I've enjoyed listening to. The topic we're going to talk about today is positioning your organization as a magnet for top talent. Every manager wants to attract the best talent because they know that translates into profits and success. However, with hundreds of applicants applying for the same job, how can you sort through them all to make sure that you're finding the best talent? And better yet, once you have that talent, how are you convincing them to stay with your organizations? I think this is one of the greatest challenges for a lot of businesses and can end up costing a substantial amount of money. And I think we all know that the fact is employees who are happy and satisfied in their jobs tend to stay with organizations, and they're less likely to leave, and they will definitely work harder. So I hope to share my thoughts with you today on what your nonprofit should be thinking about if you want to position your organization as a magnet for not only attracting talent, but retaining that top talent. So I want to start by acknowledging what a tough year 2020 was for a lot of organizations. I dare say I'm not alone, that you're glad to see that it's gone, and that we won't forget it anytime soon. The impact globally has been devastating and continues to affect our organizations. But before we get into the presentation, I'd like you to take a trip down memory lane with me. Remember where you were in May of 2020. Most of us were under stay-at-home orders. businesses were closed, daycares and schools were shuttered. And for those with children, you and your employees, you were struggling with work, family, and school obligations. And the line between the three of those things were very blurry at times. And while you weren't commuting to the office, thank goodness, because most of us had some long commutes, you worked more hours. Stress was high. And some of us didn't even have the technology infrastructure to support our employees at the time that we had to shelter in place. And we were trying to figure that all out. We discovered tools like Slack and Zoom and Teams. And if you're like me, you wish you had invested some stock in some of those companies at this point. And while some organizations had remote work policies in place and could pivot quickly, others weren't so fortunate, and they were trying to figure out those things on the fly. Employees didn't have the proper equipment to work from home. Positions that we once said could never be done from a place other than your leased office space were now being done from places around the world. And so that was really important to sort of acknowledge that. We had to figure out which jobs could be done remotely, and we had to make some tough decisions about staff. There were no gatherings for staff meetings. There were no summer picnics. There were no events. There were no holiday parties. And add to the mix other things that were happening at the time, the things that you were seeing on social media, the things that were happening in our communities, the social injustice things that were happening around us, deciding when, how, or if to have those conversations with your staff, or even determining what would not having those conversations say about you as a leader. DEI was a huge topic for organizations, both large and small, all in a pandemic. I mean, it's one thing to deal with a huge topic when there's not a pandemic or other things happening, but imagine organizations having to deal with all of those things at the same time. Unemployment was sky high, and the government stepped in to help businesses and individuals with loans and increased unemployment benefits. But some businesses still didn't survive. What a year 2020 was. For those nonprofits without dedicated HR support, your CEO, your COO, your CFAO, your office manager, their roles increased exponentially because of all the things that happened in 2020. Regulations were changing, which almost seemed like it was happening hourly for those of us who work in HR, and it was sometimes hard to keep up. For those that work in the international space with employees around the world, you had a whole different set of obligations. And I want to submit to you that 2020 was a catalyst for change in organizations like we've never seen before. It was an opportunity to seize opportunity, to create something great. And it was an opportunity to propel you and your organizations forward. So now here we are in 2021. You made it, right? The year that was is no more. But now you have to focus on the future and what post-COVID means for your organization. How are you going to position your company now so that it's a magnet for attracting and retaining talent? We've seen that the world is very different than it was a short 365 days ago. But what should you be doing to ensure the best talent in the right jobs to fulfill your mission? This slide talks about what organizations need to do. And as you can see, there are a lot of things on this slide that organizations can do to attract top and to retain top talent. I'm not going to talk about all of those in the time that we have together. I think each one of these topics could probably stand on its own as a webinar series topic. For our conversation today, I want to focus on these 5 topics: culture, empowering and engaging your employees, recognition, opportunities for growth and development, and communication. And you may have tried some of these things that I will talk about in the presentation, and you may have heard them before, but I ask that you hear me out. I want you to look at these from a different perspective. You have to now look at these from a post-COVID perspective. I think that you would agree that the way we currently do business, or we did pre-COVID, is not going to be the way that we do business post-COVID. So I want to start talking about building a people-focused culture. In case you hadn't noticed, culture is under pressure. 2020, as I said, has changed just about everything, and competition will be even more fierce than ever before. And if the pandemic has taught us anything, is that almost any job can be done from pretty much anywhere now. People are moving to different locations, not only in the US, but to other parts of the world. And those office-based roles are now flexible to the point where an employee can pick up and move just about anywhere. And this means greater competition in a wider market. Maybe your market was a little bit smaller, but now, given COVID, that market is much wider, and employers need to stand out in the market. And if you're not keeping up, you're getting left behind, and you need to stay ahead of the competition to differentiate your organizations. According to a recent LinkedIn survey, how and why people change jobs, 49% of candidates hesitate or decline to accept a position, no matter how high it pays, because they don't know anything about the culture. They don't know about the organization. And so that's what you need to do. You need to find ways to make yourself stand out as an organization. People feel uncertain when it comes to the unknown, and they tend to fall back on those things that are comfortable. So if you're not standing out in the market and your culture is not standing out, then people are less likely to leave the organizations where they are to come and join your organization. Organizations that create a people-focused culture will likely attract and keep top talent, and those cultures should be rooted in the organization's values that are reinforced by leadership. Organizations need to clearly define their corporate culture and then ensure it's articulated and understood and lived every day by the organization. In a recent survey by Deloitte, 94% of executives and 88% of employees believe that a distinct work culture is important to business success. That's huge. 94% of executives and 88% of employees feel that the culture that they're working in is critically important to the success of the organization. And that's why it's so important that people pay attention to culture. And I would submit that the first thing that you have to do if you're going to create a strong company culture is to define and document that culture. The culture of your company is the backbone of your business. And just like you would document your business strategy and your priorities and your business plan, you should do the same thing with your culture. You should be working with your leadership and your employees to define your mission, your values, your vision, what employees can expect from you and the organization, and what donors and clients and those that you serve can expect. And I know that a lot of people on the call, I have my mission, I have my vision, I have my values. Employees know what they can expect from me. My donors know what they can expect from me. But do they know what they can expect post-COVID? So think about that in that particular context. And even if you are satisfied with the mission values and vision, I would submit to you that you revisit those just to make sure that they're still in alignment. I want to say a special word about values, especially in this environment. It's really going to be important for you to protect your values. You have been forced to make some difficult decisions, and you'll have more difficult decisions that you'll have to make. But please make sure that you don't allow those decisions to undermine your organization's core values and what your employees, your clients, and your customers can expect from you. Because that says a lot about you as an organization. That says a lot about you to individuals who are coming to your website to apply for positions with you. When you document and you define your culture clearly, whether it's in a document, a presentation, or a video, maybe from your CEO, make sure that the expectations are clear. Everyone will know what you stand for, how you want your employees to feel, and how they will be treated working from you. And I think the first demonstration of that is when you advertise for a new role. Now, this is a candidate's first exposure to your organization. What does the job description say about equity in your organization? How does it show, how they'll have a voice when they're hired? How this transparency, is it apparent to them, the level of transparency in the organization? People are going to be they're going to be looking at everything in the job ad from the words in the job ads to social media to sites like Glassdoor and In Her Site. And you can refer to what it's like to work for you in those ads so that the information the candidates are looking for is right there. You don't want them to have to look for information about what kind of culture your organization has. And when you do that, you are positioning yourself to be more marketable for potential candidates. And through this initial demonstration to your to potential candidates, you are telling them what you value and what's important. Add those employee testimonials to your career sites to provide candidates with a better insight of the day-to-day goings on of your organization. That visibility is going to be really important, and what your employees are saying will really matter. And during the recruitment process, I want to talk about that for a second. You're asking candidates to put their best foot forward and to demonstrate why they should be working for your organization. And I think a lot of organizations are missing top talent because of that mentality. You need to see recruitment like a sport. My daughter happens to play volleyball, so I know a little bit about scouting and sporting and from that perspective. And if you know anything about sports, you know whether it's college or professional sports, scouts are looking for the best talent to join an organization. And scouts are showing you why that potential top talent should come to work or play for them. And in their recruitment process, they are being interviewed as much as they are interviewing. So what is it about your organization that would entice someone to come to work for you? How are you putting your best foot forward when you're exposing candidates to opportunities in your organizations? Companies can showcase their unique culture and establish their brand in a positive light, which is going to boost transparency, improve their reputation, attract and retain top talent, and reduce employee turnover. Candidates are looking and employees are looking for more than a 9-to-5 that pays well. They're looking for a good company culture, that ever elusive work-life balance and benefits. They're looking for a culture that's welcoming, transparent, and engaging, that makes them feel respected. A positive work culture that is people-focused will build that kind of employer-employee relationship that will encourage employees to stay with your organization. With the ever-rising wave of young and talented workers, what they value in an organization changes dramatically. They aren't just looking for the big salaries. They're not looking for the bonus. They're not looking for the corner office. They're looking for some place that they enjoy working, a culture that supports them and aligns with their values. And that's why I mentioned values at the top, is that, that's going to be a really important part of how you're going to be attracting and retaining top talent in your organization. And if you haven't communicated that somewhere, they are less likely to seek opportunities with your organization. Don't get me wrong, pay is important, but it is an important factor when it comes to attracting the best talent on the market. But a lot of your potential candidates are placing more importance on your company culture. They're going to be attracted to companies that have a positive working environment and a reputation for a good place to work. And when candidates are reading job descriptions or vacancy announcements, they want to hear from the existing workforce. As I said, they're going to be looking at sites like Glassdoor and In Her Site. They're going to be reviewing those sites even before they apply, and they want to see how is the organization putting their best foot forward. And so I would implore you to make sure that you are paying attention to those review sites, because it takes one disgruntled employee or one upset candidate to post a negative review that will do some serious damage to this people-focused culture that you are going to be creating in your organizations. And by getting your employees to showcase all the positive aspects of the working environment, you'll be able to secure the best talent for the next application or the next vacancy that comes along in your organization. So I'll leave you with this thought about culture. And you may have heard it before. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. And you can have the most dynamic strategy, but if the strategy doesn't support a strong, positive organizational culture, what good is it? So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about how you can empower and engage your employees now that we've talked about setting the stage in terms of setting the right culture for your organization.
Can I make a comment here?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I've really appreciated in partnering with in gender health is that as soon as you walk in the door, all the offices have glass doors. There is a sense of transparency and approachability. I think that is so important in this culture because the typical mindset of having the door that you don't know what's going on the other side certainly does not create that kind of culture. And I think not only that, but I think the mentality from Tracy all the way down to the associates that are in the office. I know that she values every employee at every level. And again, those things are those things now have to really be communicated and not just assumed, right?
Mhm.
That we can't assume that our employees know that we appreciate them, but it's more of it's the note that the CEO writes or the little care package you send to your employees at home. Those little things, the happy hours that you can still have,
Mhm.
on Zoom. I think all those little things add a lot of value, particularly when people are not seeing each other face to face right now. So though taking advantage of those opportunities, I think goes such a long way because what you said is so true. One bad review on Glassdoor could really hurt your organization. And so the one other thing that I wanted to add is that when you do the interview process, I would absolutely have the candidate meet with the people on the team that they're going to work with,
Mhm.
not just the hiring manager, but the people they're going to interact with on a daily basis, with the assumption that those people are happy employees. I think that they're probably in some cases, the only way to overcome the negativity that the candidate may have seen on Glassdoor or something like that. So I think introducing them to that team, letting them have a private conversation where they can speak openly. I think those are really, really, again, giving people the opportunity to learn the culture. So I think
Absolutely.
are really important things.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And to that point about transparency, even our president and CEO sits in an office and we can see in, so we see who's in her office. So there's that, I mean, the transparency starts at the highest level of the organization is what I'm trying to say. It starts at the highest level of the organization. So thank you for that, Mia. What I want to say about empowering and engaging employees is that organizations that typically have the highest level of employee engagement are the very same organizations in which employees are empowered. In fact, there's a recent study that says there's a direct correlation between the degree to which an employees feel who are self-managed and the level at which they are engaged. And so making a commitment as an organization to engage and empower people will lead to action. And of course, empowerment engagement just doesn't happen. It takes good leadership that is supportive and sincere to ensure that employees feel as if they are free to make decisions and to take a decision with autonomy. I once worked for an organization that led with, failure equaled fear, right? And so when there was no innovation, there was no creativity, there was, people kind of stayed in their lane. They didn't veer outside of their lane at all because failure equaled fear for them. And people didn't stay long in the organization because of that. And you don't want to, that's not engaging and empowering your employees. That's creating a sense of fear in them. And so, when we talk about the importance of culture, which affects employee engagement significantly, make sure that your company culture is promoting and rewarding good performance. They're rewarding dedication, they're rewarding effort, they're rewarding, and they're praising employees. You want to make sure that they're going to be engaged and productive. And when you lead with fear of failure, then people won't be productive, they won't be innovative, they won't be creative. And when you have a strong culture, employees will understand exactly what you expect from them, and they'll work hard to achieve that. They'll feel connected, they'll feel involved, they'll feel supported. Most importantly, they'll feel engaged. 21% of engaged employees are productive. In terms of staff retention, 73% of disengaged employees are actively looking for jobs compared to 37% of engaged employees. 73%, that's huge. Who can afford to lose 73% of their workforce? So it's important that the culture be set and that you're engaging and empower your employees, so that 73%, you're finding a way to engage them. And so if you want to attract top talent, to your company and retain that top talent, then you're going to have to start by improving and defining your culture, and then empowering your employees. And as I said a little bit ago about failure shouldn't equal fear. I mean, people are going to make mistakes. When you give people autonomy and you give them the opportunity to be creative, they're going to be mistakes. As long as they're not mission critical offenses, I think you're going to be fine. You're giving people the autonomy to be creative. And what I mean by mission critical is the best example that I've heard of and that I often use is, it's okay to test a new advertising method and discover that it doesn't work, versus it's never okay to engage in false and deceptive advertising. Those are two very different things. So when you give an employee the bandwidth to create this new or test this new advertising method, there's a possibility that it won't fail. But I think what's really important is that you don't criticize the employee for the failure. You recognize the effort, you tweak it, and then you sort of move on. But if they fail and it's like shame on you, and it's never okay for them to do that, and they will shut down and they will become overly conservative at that point. Okay, I want to talk about recognition. You've all seen Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you understand that really well. But I want to submit to you that the number one reason that people leave is because they're not recognized for the work that they do. And if you haven't set the culture, you haven't empowered and engaged in employees, no degree of recognition or general improvements in their working environment is going to make employees feel empowered. You've taken the steps to attract and retain, and now you need to find out what motivates that person and what's going to keep them engaged in the process. And I think a lot of employers make the mistake of thinking that all of their employees are excited by money, but that isn't the case. Studies have confirmed that quite a few loyal employees are actually more excited about advancement opportunities, promotions, and other non-monetary incentives. But I would ask you to recognize successful results, recognize good efforts. When an employee shows initiatives and takes action to solve problems, improve processes, or create growth for your organization, the recognition that you provide them will encourage them to do the same in the future. And it's through these efforts that they're really going to make a difference for your organization, and rewarding them is an appropriate action to take. Now, I recognize that not all nonprofits have the budget to give substantial increases. And recognition is not just about salaries and benefits, though those things are important. And employees also understand that all jobs are not created equal, and they can't get paid as much as the CEO. That said, employees want to feel fairly compensated for their work. If your company is not able to pay higher salaries, you can always incentivize employees in other ways. Employees want to feel like they're valued for their work, and while bonuses and rewards are great, there are other ways that you can certainly do that. You can create recognition programs and have ideas of how to recognize employees for different things. So I'd ask you to look at your programs and your policies and how are they supporting recognition. The good old pat on the back goes a long way, in making employees feel valued. And as I said, employees who feel valued are more likely to stick around. It's important to note that everyone plays a part in the success of the organization, no matter how big or small their contribution. So it's important to make a point to recognize great employees and thank them for their hard work and dedication. A simple note of gratitude, an email, all those things can go a really long way. I'm reading a book now called Leading with Gratitude by Chester Elton and Adrian Gostick. And one of the quotes, passages from the book I want to read to you because I thought it was really powerful. It says, I quote, "Gratitude is not just a matter of using thank yous and, we think you're great as employees. It's not just a checklist or something that's perfunctory. These expressions have to be sincere and specific. Leading in this way is not only giving credit where credit is due, it's knowing where credit is due. Monthly monetary bonuses are always nice, but recognize a job well done goes a long way to creating goodwill and loyalty. Recognition needs to be specific. Good job is acceptable, but good job on the implementation of the blackboard project is more specific. And the employee then knows what, what your reward, what you're recognizing them for. In another recent study that I read, that when employees feel undervalued and appreciated, we all know they start to look for other employment, right? The role was valuable when you hired it. So why do you have it if it's not valuable, and why you're not recognizing employees for that? So provide praise and feedback at every opportunity that you can. You don't want to overdo it, obviously, because you do want it to be sincere. Top talent is smart enough to recognize sincere appreciation versus platitudes, right? And so you want to make sure that when you're giving recognition, it is sincere. And the payoff for getting that right not only comes in boosting performance and morale, but getting a better understanding of how your employees are contributing and what more they have to give, because undoubtedly they will have more to give. I follow this millennial blogger. Her name is Katie Zimmerman, and she sums up recognition this way, and I quote, "What normal person doesn't want to be recognized, thanked, or praised for a job well done? We all have a deep-rooted need to know what we do matters and is appreciated. We do work in a multi-generational workforce, and each generation has its own set of expectations about this. We often hear that millennials are the only generation that want this. This is not just what the millennials want. The difference with the millennials is that they don't feel loyal to the company just because you hired them. They feel loyal when they are appreciated, valued, and rewarded," end quote. So I thought that was a really powerful way to sort of demonstrate the value of recognition. And it's just not for, it just doesn't apply to millennials. So just remember that a bit of positive feedback can go a long way. Everyone wants to be recognized for their work, and consistent appreciation for work does go a long way.
Yeah, and I would add that that's part of the culture we were talking about earlier, right? To be able to be consistent in that. There's, I think in the past, there's been that mindset, why do you need recognition? You're getting, your paycheck is your recognition.
Right.
But you can get a paycheck really anywhere is really the mindset now. And so if you have somebody who is in this pandemic period, if you have anybody that's been unhappy in their role for one reason or another, they're looking online. And so then you get that resignation and you're like, what happened?
What happened?
As employers and hiring managers, we should never be surprised when somebody gives their notice. Well, we should be surprised because we've done so much along the way to help them. So why would they leave us? So if that happens, obviously you don't have any control over that. But I think you're right, absolutely, that giving the people the freedom to make choices and to make decisions. That's so important because, the millennials are not afraid to make mistakes.
No, they're not. They're not.
They're willing to step out, and those are the candidates you really want to hire anyway. The ones that are willing to think outside the box, right? And be willing to push the boundaries a little bit. And that's really what we describe as top talent, those individuals.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
And not by money, that's for sure. Well,
absolutely.
A lot of them are, but that's not the only thing they're driven
by. Exactly. All right, so let's talk about opportunities for growth. Once you've attracted the talent, it can be a challenge not to let them get lured away, just like Mia just mentioned. And one of the things that always seems to do the trick is providing opportunities for growth. And when employers hear development, they hear dollar signs, right? And so I want you to not always equate growth with dollar signs, because it's not always about sending them to conferences, sending them to trainings. That it's not always about the dollars. And all the movement doesn't have to be vertical; it can be lateral. Encourage employees to stretch, take on roles and responsibilities that reflect their skills, even if it means transferring to another role or changing the path that they initially had when they joined the organization. One of the things that I really like about where I work now is that we create opportunities for staff to grow. If we have a committee, if we have a task force, we want individuals who are interested in those opportunities to raise their hand. Those are opportunities for them to grow and to use their skill set a little bit differently outside of their job description. And so we've been clear with our teammates that when there are opportunities for growth like that and opportunities to use your skill set differently, we want you to raise your hand. We want you to be involved in the process. We want you to take those skills and use them differently for the organization, because at the end of the day, the value that we get from that is, there's no dollar amount that we can put on that. We want to give challenging and stimulating work. Tap into the passion, allow them to focus their time on things that they enjoy doing, that will help contribute to the success of the organization. And you have to let them know when those opportunities present themselves. Don't present, here's a task force and, we already have 5 people, communicate that widely and broadly. So those who are really interested in those opportunities do have the opportunity to participate and to raise their hand if they're really interested in growing in that way. The more you support your employees in this way, the more they will trust you, and that you have their best interests at heart. For those organizations that can provide upward mobility, I think that's great. You can provide growth paths, but I know that in small nonprofits, that's not always the case. So I challenge you to think of other ways that you can provide growth opportunities. Everything in life changes, including people, and you don't want people to grow stagnant. You don't want people to what I call resign in place. We've heard about retire in place, but you don't want people to resign in place, and the only reason they're coming to work every day is to get a paycheck. You want them to learn, you want them to grow, you want them to try new opportunities, you want them to take on challenging new tasks. They may feel they've hit a ceiling and, they want to move on to another employer, but you have the opportunity now to capture that, to recapture that and provide those opportunities that they see are available to them from their organization. And the other thing that I will submit as part of this conversation about opportunities for growth is that we all know that employees are not one-dimensional, and they bring different other talents to your organizations other than the ones that you hired them for. And so how are you tapping into those skills, and how are you tapping into those talents? How are you tapping into those past experiences that will help the organization? We created a program at an organization I worked at a few years back, that we allowed our New York staff to spend time in the DC office and vice versa. And part of the reason for doing that was DC never knew what New York's job was, and New York never knew what DC's job was. And so we created a sort of a job shadowing mentorship program where employees had to apply for those opportunities. They came to Washington, or we sent people to New York, where they would learn, what the office did, what the roles and responsibilities were for those people that they shadowed, and they were picking up new skill sets. So I would submit that it's not always about sending someone to a conference, or they want a college degree or finish their degree, or they want a master's degree. It's not always about those opportunities. Just please look for different ways that you can provide those opportunities for growth to your employees. The other thing that I really like about where I work now is that we give employees time, right? Sometimes you can't always give employees as much money as they like. And you might not be able to send them to that expensive training conference or training or whatever it may be, but you can generally give employees time, right? And that's time to learn, time to experiment, time to be creative, and time to innovate. And that's one of the things that I really appreciate about Engender Health is, our leadership gives employees the time that they need for that experimentation, for that growth, for that learning, for that, to be creative and innovative. And so I would ask, how are you providing opportunities that can expand an employee's abilities and minimize the skills gap? And that's where we talk about upskilling, right? So upskilling focuses on improving the employee's current skill sets, usually through training, but it doesn't always have to be, so that they can advance in their jobs. And again, it doesn't necessarily result in a promotion, but maybe it's a different role in the organization. And the reason to think about upskilling is because technology changes. You may have hired a person for a particular role with a particular skill set, a few years ago, but as we know, everything evolves over time. So how are you making sure that the employees' skills are keeping up with what you need as an organization? And so it's really important to consider upskilling, because jobs and their requirements are changing faster than ever. Employees have more expectations around growth. It helps your organization stay competitive by closing the skills gap. It decreases the need to recruit outside of the company. Here's opportunities for promotion from within, opportunities for job satisfaction, boosting morale, performance, and motivation. And it also increases employee retention. So if you're not looking at upskilling as a potential way to provide some growth for your employees, then I would submit to you that is definitely an opportunity for you to do that.
Yeah, and again, I would add there that I think the whole idea, I love that. I'm not sure that I've heard of upskilling, but I think that's such a great concept, because if we're looking at top talent, they want to spread their wings, they want to learn, they want to grow, they want to be challenged, you know? And those individuals, when they get bored, are the ones that are looking somewhere else, you know? And so even with your own, with your own staff, if you're willing to take a little risk, and maybe it's an accountant that is a really, really good at another area, giving them that little, that's
Absolutely.
to grow. I think that's such a really great idea.
Absolutely agree.
Exactly the way you keep them engaged, right?
Absolutely.
And I will say, there was a client, and Kathy O'Connor would remember this. There was a at the National Academies of Science. I remember there was a person there that was a GL accounting manager, and she actually didn't want to do accounting anymore. And she moved it, I can't remember, a whole different division of the company. And they recognized her talent. And they, let her go into another group. And I think she did really, really well there. So again, it's, you don't always have to fit every single, check mark to do something different. Giving people that the liberty to kind of grow in their thinking, I think is helpful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about with respect to positioning yourself as a magnet for top talent is communication. We've talked about it throughout the other points that I wanted to make about top talent, but I wanted to specifically call out communication as one of the ways that you can attract and retain top talent. Applying for a role can be confusing and sometimes challenging for an employee who is thrilled about the opportunity to come and work for you. They put in the work to complete the application, prepare for the interviews, and then nothing, right? They don't hear back from you. This leaves a poor impression on the company for the candidate. And this is where you may see some of those negative reviews in some of those places that I talked about. They're not hearing back from you. And I want to submit that it's just as important to communicate consistently and timely, even when the person doesn't get the role. Candidates are so often ghosted. That's my word. I know some other HR person knows what that means. We don't get back to the person in a timely manner. Even an automated response is better than no response at all. And having a reputation as a considerate employer is also going to help position your organization as a magnet for top talent. The other thing that I would suggest is, take time to talk to your employees regularly and foster a relationship built around good communication. Understand their goals and ambitions and find out what's going to make their job easier. Help them with any roadblocks and listen to their ideas and feedback. They want to feel like their opinion matters. And so treat them like an essential part of the team. And likewise, be sure and provide them with adequate feedback on how they can improve. And I'm a big proponent of not waiting until the annual review process to communicate to an employee how they're doing. So helpful feedback along the way will motivate them to work even harder. The other thing I want to say about communication is make sure that you're communicating at all levels and from all levels in the organization. I know I've talked a lot about my organization, but I'm really proud of the work that we've been doing at Engender Health. Our president will typically meet with every new hire when she can. It's often unheard of that, the person at the highest level of your organization will meet with, an accountant or a receptionist, but she values the opinions of those employees so much that she makes time in her schedule. It's really important to her that she's communicating, that they know that her door is open, that that she's able to communicate with them, that when new hires come on board, we schedule time on her calendar that she has an opportunity, if it's only 15, 20 minutes out of her day, that she spends with new employees. And so, I submit to you, how is your leadership communicating with your staff? Is there an open door policy? And I mean a true open door policy. Now, that doesn't mean that the person can just walk into the boss's office and expect everything. No, it means that you're having an honest conversation as much as you're able to. You're giving the staff a space when and where needed to be heard. And you're not multitasking while you're having that conversation. You're really focused on active listening with that, whomever is coming to you for, advice or suggestions, or if they have an issue or concern that they need to communicate to you. The other thing that I would submit is that, in terms of soliciting feedback from your staff, are you surveying your staff? I think a lot of us have the fear of what we might learn. And my question to you is, what happens if you don't know? Right? What happens if you don't know what's happening? You might not know there are certain things that are important to them that they aren't communicating to you. And that top talent is leaving because of that, because they have no mechanism by which they feel comfortable, or it's not clear how they should be communicating concerns with you. And so by surveying and having an effective way to communicate, you can see how your employees are reacting, how they're working, if they're satisfied. You can measure what's working. You can see what you need to improve. You've given employees a way to feel heard, and you're asking them for ideas that you might not have thought of. Where I work now, we recently went through an exercise where we revisited our company values, our core values. And this was an exercise we not only wanted the executive team to weigh in on, we surveyed all of our employees. So we surveyed all 400 of our employees worldwide, not just in the US, because it was important that every voice was heard in our discussion about what our values would be, because we all had to own them and we all had to live into those values. And once we surveyed, the executive team reviewed them, we made some tweaks based on the survey. And then we surveyed one final time to say, okay, here they are. These are the values that we're going to be living by. And we've got really great feedback from that. And involving them in the process created ownership for those values, and not something that was just handed down from leadership. And, we didn't just say, here they are, and, you have to make them work for you. We asked how we would like, how would they like to see those to work? Again, that's part of empowering and engaging and communicating and building the culture. So all of those things, really go hand in hand. The other thing that I would submit is, it's not only important what you communicate, but how you communicate. I know I'm talking to a group of professionals. Your managers are your first line of defense. And so, the language that they're using, make sure that that doesn't contradict the goal of creating the culture of engagement and empowerment, or contradict your values, right? If one of your values is respect, and that one of your managers is not communicating respectfully, then you need to do something about that, because now that's in contradiction to your values. And this will impact your ability to attract that top talent. So they need to be mindful of tone and the words that they're using in their conversations. And finally, I want to talk about recruitment as part of communication. And this is just an aside, and this is probably a whole nother topic that we could do a different seminar series on, Mia. During your recruitment process, during the interviews, there are certain things that you should be communicating, saying, or asking. This will signal to candidates what you value and what's important. Now, there's always going to be a bona fide occupational qualification reason that you might ask a question, and ask away if it's job related, but make sure that you're asking that same question to everyone. And what I'm getting at is that there are employment anti-discrimination laws that prohibit employers from asking questions, generally about race, color, sex, gender, national origin, age, disability, marital status, all of those things, all those other protected classes. And so your managers should be trained in how to properly interview. There is so much value in educating your managers, as this is going to affect your ability to attract and retain top talent. So if a resume says that a person's from Pittsburgh, that's where they're from, right? They're from Pittsburgh. So you shouldn't be asking to say, well, I'm not sure that that's true. And sometimes those things come up in small talk about, where a person is or where they're from. But I will submit to you that if a person doesn't get a job, they may be able to claim national origin discrimination because you asked them where they were from. I mean, that's, if it's not relevant for the job, and it probably isn't in this case, then that should never be asked. The same about questions about family status. You should never ask a family status question. You don't ask, do you have kids? You can say, you know, we have a mandatory overtime schedule. Are you able to work that type of schedule? And that gets at it's work related. You're getting at the response that you need because it's job related. And I worked at an organization a long time ago. And I was the first ever HR director for this organization. I was really excited about this opportunity. And my very first day in the office, I walk in, I meet my supervisor, who's the senior vice president. So he's at the highest level of the organization. He reports to the president of the organization. I sit down, I have my pen, my paper, I'm ready to take notes. I'm eagerly, you know, I got all these great ideas about what I want to do about HR for this organization. And the very first thing he says to me is, you know, when we were interviewing you, I wanted to ask this question, but I knew I couldn't. Do you have children? And I said, in fact, I do. I have 5 children. And he says, that's going to be a problem. Now, you just hired me as the very first HR director for this organization. And the first question that you asked me on day 1 is, do I have children? And his rationale for that was, this is a fast-paced, overtime, early morning, late night organization. And so anybody who has a family is not going to be successful here because of that. I will tell you that he had a cot in his office because there were days he didn't go home because he worked just that much. I determined very quickly that that was not the place that I wanted to, that's not the place where I wanted to work because of that. So I say that to say, make sure that your hiring managers know what questions they can ask and why they're asking them, and make sure that they're asking those questions to all of the candidates and not just the ones that they perceive might be concerns and they're not work related. So here are the takeaways. We've gone through them pretty quickly. Don't ignore your culture. We've talked about how important that is. The importance of engaging and empowering your employees, prioritize communications, seek those opportunities for growth, and they don't always have to have dollar signs with behind them, and provide recognition so your employees feel valued and recognized and rewarded. So thank you, Mia, for the opportunity to present today.
Thank you. Thank you for all that great information. And we will have these slides so that I will send them out to you. So what I want to tell you guys is that this is such an important topic. What Maxine mentioned at the end about managing, training your hiring managers on interviewing. That is so important. This is such a huge liability that if they're not hired, they could say things that could come back to you in your organization. So I would tell you to really hire the people that are meeting with your candidates. So I'm going to ask if there are any questions for you guys to forward them to me, because I'd love to ask Maxine some questions. But while you do that, let me just tell you that at Chisholm Consulting, this is what we do. We work with people like Maxine and Tracy Baird to help their organization find great talent across the nonprofit work. And we do everything from finance and accounting to development to philanthropy to government affairs. And we're really well networked in the community. So we have great candidates that we're currently working with. So if you need help with an open role, or you have just, you need some help thinking through it because we're in a new normal, please reach out to me. I'm happy to help you and help you think through that. Sometimes help better to get somebody from the outside helping you think through it, as opposed to trying to think through it yourself. But I will say, Maxine, one of the things that I got out of all of this was so many of the tips you gave were so good for parenting. Speaking of children, it was great information, of course. But I wanted to ask you, are there any specific changes you've made that has helped you to see success in your organization since the pandemic?
Wow,
maybe a couple practical things.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you for that, Mia. One of the things that I would say has helped us as an organization is we have continued to find ways to stay in touch and engage with employees. When we were in the office, you saw everybody on a daily basis, and you had those happenstance social gatherings in the pantry. And so one of the things that I've been deliberate about from day one of the pandemic is I check in with staff individually. I check in with everybody individually to see how they're doing, what they need, what they're struggling with. They hear from me, not on an every other week basis, on a monthly basis. And I didn't do that before, right? I didn't do that pre-pandemic. But now I make sure that I am checking in with them to see how how things are going. What do they need? Do they have what they need to be successful at home? What challenges are they facing? I always make them know that I'm available, because one of the things that HR always gets is when you're in the office, I get, do you have a minute or do you have a second, right? So they have the opportunities to stop by and to poke their head in. And so that those opportunities aren't there. We can't do that over Zoom. We can't do that over Teams, although they will ping me on Teams sometimes for that. But I've made a deliberate attempt to reach out to them. And oftentimes I'll get, I'm great, I'm fine. And other times I'll get, I do have a question, or I do have a concern. Can I call you now? Absolutely. I've made the space for that. And so it's just creating that space for those conversations that's been really important for me.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, again, creating that culture of open door and come and speak with me about whatever. Because I think a lot of things kind of get kind of swept to the side now. It's because you're not in front of them, right?
Yeah, a lot of things do get swept to the side.
So I think that's great. So I do have a question here. I'll read it to you. How does a person who doesn't have managerial responsibilities impact how the organization manages around the issues that you spoke about?
That's a really good question. If you'll remember, I talked about empowering and engaging employees. Just because a person doesn't have a title of manager or supervisor doesn't mean that they're not a leader. And so you have to create opportunities to put them in those roles and create those opportunities for them to be in leadership roles, if you will. So if you're going to create a task force, it doesn't have to be a manager or supervisor leading that task force. If there's something else going on in your organizations, don't always look for the manager or the leader to be in a position to lead that particular effort or whatever that might be. Look for someone else who has the potential, and engage them in that conversation about, here's a really good opportunity to grow your leadership skills, right? You might not be a supervisor now, but here's something that will certainly serve you well, in our organization, and it can set you up for a managerial role down the road. You just don't know.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's even that they know that you thought about them for that role, right? Instead of them initiating, but that you thought about, wow, this could be really good for Susie, and that Susie never thought about that before. So I think, again, that's also great input. Well, thank you so much. We are exactly at 1 o'clock. We appreciate you guys all joining us again this week. And we have one more next week, which is on diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's going to be a very, very good topic. Obviously, this is such a critical topic right now in our culture. So join us next Wednesday, and we will see you then. Thank you.